Quality, comfort, and grip at an affordable price. Whether it's our standard, pro, or elite socks, there's an option for everyone. Try a pair for yourself now at puregripsocks.com.
You want to see some real speed? Oh, I'll show you speed. While it's never not been popular, as of late, because of the movies, Sonic is a bit of a hot commodity. And maybe I'm dating myself a little bit here, but when I was a kid, Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 on the Sega Dreamcast was it. So what I'm about to show you I'm pretty excited about, but I'd also be lying if I didn't say they're also kind of a bit disappointing. The box, however, does not disappoint. You can see it's in that iconic Green Hill Zone styling, green on the top, brown on the bottom, the official Sonic the Hedgehog logo there, and then you have the brand of boot, which is Phenom with their P logo on one side and then full Phenom written out on the other, all white on the bottom. And then if you take a look at the label side of the box, there he is, the man himself, looking particularly angry. But you'll notice I have two boxes where it still has the Sonic the Hedgehog logo on the lid, but turn it over to the side and you'll see why these might just be the most powerful football boots ever made, with Knuckles the Echidna. But here's where things might get a little disappointing. Open the box up and on the inside you'll find the boots themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the Phenom Quantum Energy Sonic the Hedgehog football boots. They bear a very inexpensive retail price of $95 and have some components to them that you might recognize, but at the end of the day, what we realistically have here is a very budget-friendly, generic pair of kind of copycat football boots with Sonic the Hedgehog on the side of the foot. A design that would typically be reserved for children that you can get all the way up to a size 12. Where of course the Sonic pair is mostly blue, and as you'd probably expect, the Knuckles pair is mostly red. It's the exact same boot, minus the color, and of course Knuckles on the side rather than Sonic. Now for those unfamiliar with the Phenom brand, like I was myself, they're more of an American football cleat company specializing in cleats and gloves, but are now of course branching out into football boots, with the Quantum Energy being their very first model. $95 if you want the officially licensed Sonic the Hedgehog pairs, but $10 less if you want the more generic non-Sonic pairs. Which, let's be honest, why would you want that? Where I must admit, as much as you would get roasted by all your teammates for wearing football boots with Sonic the Hedgehog quite literally plastered on the side of the upper, I think it's a pretty cool idea. I'm just a little bit surprised that Sega would license the Sonic the Hedgehog name and likeness to a brand like Phenom that in their football cleats, to be fair to them, they do tons of different licensing colorways with all kinds of different characters, but Sonic being as popular as it is, I just can't imagine why one other bigger brand wouldn't be interested in doing some kind of a collab. Nonetheless, this is what we have for now, and unfortunately, the final product is passable, especially for what they cost, but certainly if you're expecting some top-notch performance, what we have here is a generic parts bin football boot at best. Where if we start by focusing in on the sole plate, it's a design that might look familiar to you, and that's because it is more or less directly stolen from the Adidas brand in what was featured on both the X Speed Portal and X Crazy Fast. Where as you can see side by side with the real thing, it's very clear where the design inspiration came from. For me, this is just a little bit too close to what Adidas was doing for me to truly applaud Phenom for doing something good here. This is something that I really don't like to see in the football boot industry, so for this to be one of their first entries into this world, I don't think that's a very good start. Even little things like these tiny little dots incorporated into the mold itself being taken and put on their model only goes to show that it's very clear that they were just trying to copy. These three studs running through the middle are identical on the Phenom variation, where of course you will notice that the studs themselves are all conical on the Phenoms and you have 4 along either side of the forefoot rather than 3. But beyond that, I'm just having a hard time giving them any credit for what they've done here. And that's not to suggest that the quality is poor, because again, for $95, $85 if you don't go for the Sonic variation, they actually feel pretty decent, and they're not necessarily the most responsive thing in the world. They do have a little bit more of like a thicker, almost rubbery feel to them in terms of how it flexes, rather than truly giving you that spring back effect. However, what they list in the tech specs on their website is extremely misleading. This is just the first paragraph talking specifically about the sole plate. At the heart of these cleats lies the Quantum Energy model, which I'm not sure actually makes sense, featuring an ultra-light carbon fiber traction insert that not only enhances durability, but also provides a spring-like responsiveness, giving you that extra edge when maneuvering through tight spaces. The lightweight tooling inlay contributes to the aerodynamic design, ensuring you move effortlessly across the pitch while maintaining optimal speed. That's like every football boot technology buzzword of all time and then some in just 2 sentences. Where if you were paying attention, you probably heard me say carbon fiber insert, and that is in reference to this little white piece that fills in the cutouts of that stud plate on the surface, which does have some carbon fiber texturing kind of pressed into the surface of the plastic, but as I just said, it is in fact plastic rather than carbon fiber. Why they would say that it's carbon fiber when it's very clearly not, I have absolutely no idea. The only thing that I can think is on the original colorways of the Speed Portal, that insert was made by a company called Carbitex, made of actual carbon fiber. It looked like this. You probably remember the Speed Portal 0.1s. My theory is that in copying the design, they also copied the tech specs, but failed to recognize that their design does not utilize the same materials at all. But then again, they also listed the sole plate tooling as being aerodynamic, so I think they were just throwing buzzwords at the wall and seeing what would stick. However, I'm not sure what the rules are on claiming to provide elements that aren't actually there. As for the upper, it's kind of what we've come to expect from more generic, less expensive football boots, in that it's a single layer of mesh as a base and then a TPU film on the surface. They call it a single layer mono mesh construction with a low opacity dual layer TPU film. It almost seems like there was more effort put into writing the tech specs than there was actually designing the football boots. Nonetheless, this mesh-based material with what is admittedly kind of a thicker, more structured TPU material on the outside and a TPU layer on the inside to reinforce everything, acting as the liner, it has a little bit more of that stiff sensation, but doesn't necessarily feel bad in any way at all. And I actually really like the shaping of this football boot, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the video. From a touch perspective, they're relatively thin, but not overly so. They don't really provide much in the way of softness or padding, so I would definitely classify this as more of a barefoot sensation. And the surface texture, there's a little bit of texture from the mesh on the underside, but for the most part, it's relatively smooth and slick on the surface, providing nothing in the way of extra grip. And if you're wondering, there is no difference in feel or fit between Sonic or Knuckles. Like so many football boots these days, this does feature a one-piece upper construction, with the central portion of the upper as well as the collar area being made from a knit material, specifically quantum knit as they're calling it, and it is, again, kind of the same type of knit you'd expect to find on a boot in that sub $100 price point area. You find a central lacing system with a dual lace hole setup that's not particularly deep, but it runs deep enough to have a decent overall fit and provide some pretty solid lockdown, all things considered. I particularly like this little split right at the very top of this kind of heightened collar area at the front of the foot. It just provides that little bit of relief so you don't get any awkward bunching. Probably my favorite design element of this entire football boot, other than Sonic just printed there on the side. It's a low cut design with a little bit of a mock collar along the edge that we've seen so many times before. You have an internal plastic heel counter providing plenty of solid structure, and then the heel liner is actually pretty decent. You can tell that these guys have made footwear before, because the overall build quality, despite the copying that has gone on, is actually pretty decent. The microfiber is super smooth and there's a decent amount of padding, and then the insole fully removable. I'll give you guys a quick look at that. It's thicker than what we would typically find in a pair of football boots, which again, not too surprising given that they normally do American football cleats where you don't need to be as low profile as a lot of football boots. Not to say that these feel too tall, But you can see it has a pretty standard mesh liner on the surface. You have the Quantum logo with the actual size of the boots under the heel, and then the official Sonic the Hedgehog logo plastered there in the middle, the insole itself being made from a single layer of this white foam that, again, is actually quite thick and feels pretty decent. And then there's the weight, where obviously these are speed boots and these are power boots, but because they're exactly the same thing, the weight should be no different. In a size 9.5 US, using the scale, will weigh the Sonic Quantum Energy football boots, and you can see that they weigh in at 8.6 ounces, the equivalent of 244 grams, which is not exceptionally light, but also not exceptionally heavy. It's more or less about what you would expect from a football boot at this price point. On feet, they feel pretty much the way they look, and that is fast and powerful. More seriously, they don't feel bad at all. The sole plate, like I said, has a little bit of a thicker, kind of more rubbery feel to it in terms of not really giving you that responsiveness that they claim to be providing with the not carbon fiber, but technically, according to them, actually carbon fiber sole plate. The mesh upper, because of mostly the lining material, just has that kind of harder feel against your foot. It's a little bit on the stiffer side, but will of course soften up like any mesh upper will after just a little bit of wear time. The knit across the top of the foot really doesn't provide any tension at all. All of that is going to come from the laces, meaning that for a one-piece upper construction football boot, putting them on and taking them off is actually quite easy. But with the laces tied tight, they do feel relatively secure. I like the overall shaping that they've gone with, where from a width perspective, I think they're going to be suitable for most people. They're most narrow through the forefoot, but then have decent volume and width in the toe box area. The rest of the boot, I would say, is pretty average in terms of overall width. So as long as you don't have crazy wide feet, these should work for most people. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you were by chance looking to get a pair of Sonic or Knuckle football boots to wear as an adult, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, it's very simple. If you want to be faster than everybody else, you get the Sonic boots. And if you want to terrify the opposing team's attacking players, you go for the Knuckles ones. We need a Big the Cat football boot.